February 23, 1945. Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto crouched inside a reinforced concrete bunker, hands shaking as he scribbled words that would have meant execution if found by his superiors. The Marines are not ordinary men. They do not die like normal soldiers. Everything we were told about American frailty was false. Through the narrow firing slit, he had just seen something that contradicted every assumption hammered into him during training. 6 Marines had charged his position under relentless machine gun fire. 3 were cut down, yet the others pressed on. When his comrades unleashed a grenade barrage, one Marine absorbed the explosion with his own body to protect his squad, then continued fighting with grievous injuries until he could no longer hold his weapon. Within minutes, the survivors seized the position. 1,000 Japanese troops occupied Iwo Jima, entrenched in 18 kilometers of tunnels and fortifications. They had been assured they would face weak American soldiers who would crumble under pressure. What they encountered instead shattered every military judgment the Imperial Japanese Army held about their adversaries. The scale of this misjudgment was not measured in strategy, but in the brutal reality of close-quarters combat that would result in 26,000 Marine casualties in just 36 days. Japanese morale had begun to collapse long before Iwo Jima, August 7, 1942. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, a veteran of the China campaign where Japanese forces had seemed unstoppable, wrote in his diary after the first week of fighting, "The Americans who landed are unlike any enemy we have encountered. They do not retreat when surrounded. They do not surrender even when defeat is inevitable. Most unnerving, they fight at night as if darkness empowers them rather than terrifies them." Guadalcanal was Japan's first defensive campaign in the Pacific, and the Imperial Japanese Army expected an easy victory over inexperienced American forces. The 1st Marine Division that landed numbered just over 16,000 men. Japanese intelligence described Marines as elite, yes, but still Americans, products of a soft, democratic society prioritizing personal comfort over collective sacrifice. Within days, every assumption proved disastrously wrong. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome commanded a reinforced company tasked with retaking Henderson Field on the night of August 20th. His 200-man unit, which had defeated Chinese divisions 3 times its size, advanced in textbook formation, confident that Americans would panic in darkness. But the Marines were positioned in carefully prepared defenses with interlocking fields of fire. Fukudome's company walked into a slaughter. What followed defied all Japanese tactical doctrine. Instead of simply defending, the Marines launched an immediate counterattack in the darkness, wielding automatic weapons with deadly accuracy. Fukudome's diary, recovered after his death 3 days later, recorded his disbelief. "They attacked us at night. We are supposed to be the ones who strike in darkness. They moved through jungle we considered impassable. They killed silently, then disappeared. By dawn, only 90 men of my company remained. The Americans had suffered only 12 casualties. This pattern repeated across Guadalcanal. Japanese soldiers, accustomed to enemies crumbling under banzai charges, encountered Marines who held positions until physically overrun, then fought hand-to-hand with bayonets, knives, and fists. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, who survived 4 months on Guadalcanal before evacuation, wrote in an intercepted letter, "We were told the Americans are individualistic and will not sacrifice for comrades. This is false. I saw a Marine machine gunner keep firing with both legs shattered until Japanese infantry killed him at point-blank range. His assistant immediately took over and continued the attack. We lost 40 men at that post." The Marine training that produced such soldiers baffled Japanese analysts. Private Yamamoto, who would later face Marines at Iwo Jima, first learned about them during intelligence briefings in 1943. The instructor, a staff officer who had interrogated captured Marines, appeared genuinely disturbed. The American Marines undergo training that would be considered criminal abuse in any civilized army. They are broken down mentally and physically, then rebuilt into something unrecognizable compared to the civilians who enlisted. They are taught to regard death in combat as honorable, never to surrender, to fight until they can no longer physically continue. Yes, they have adopted elements of our Bushido, but combined it with something we did not expect: American industrial capacity. The result was catastrophic. Japanese soldiers trained in Bushido expected death before dishonor, yet they fought with increasingly inferior equipment. Marines endured training nearly as severe as Japanese soldiers, creating warriors equally willing to die but landing with overwhelming firepower that made Japanese positions untenable. November 20th, 1943. Tarawa. Atoll. Rear Admiral Ki Shibasaki commanded 4,500 defenders in supposedly impregnable fortifications. The 2nd Marine Division proved him wrong in 76 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Ogawa, one of only 17 Japanese survivors, told interrogators, "The first wave was massacred in the water. We killed hundreds. More craft arrived. The second wave died on the beach. More came. The third wave reached our positions with flamethrowers. They did not stop until we were all dead. Or they were. Nearly 4,100 men died on Tarawa in 76 hours. The Marines who survived demonstrated they would seize any objective regardless of cost. Captured documents on Saipan in 1944 showed Japanese intelligence labeling Marines as shock troops with fanatical devotion to objectives. Marines refuse orders to retreat and will counterattack even when tactically disadvantaged. Casualties do not reduce unit effectiveness until the unit is completely destroyed. This classification came from careful observation. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, a Guadalcanal survivor, noted, "American Army infantry tactics are conventional, but Marines operate differently. They advance relentlessly regardless of losses. They accept casualty rates that would stop any rational commander. This is unprecedented. The speed of Marine operations proved as deadly as their firepower." Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, commanding on Peleliu, had planned defenses assuming American forces would pause after landing. The Marines never paused. They landed September 15th at 0830 and controlled half the airfield by nightfall. Nakagawa's diary reflected his shock. "My defensive plan collapsed because it assumed the enemy would act rationally. The Marines do not act rationally. They act with total commitment regardless of circumstances." This commitment often seemed suicidal to Japanese observers, but proved devastatingly effective. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, captured on Bougainville, described watching a Marine platoon assault a fortified hilltop. The approach was across open ground swept by machine gun fire from 3 bunkers. Japanese doctrine would have required extensive artillery preparation, followed by infantry assault under smoke cover. The Marine lieutenant assessed the position for perhaps 30 seconds, then ordered the assault with no preparation. The platoon charged directly into the fire. 7 men fell in the first 20 seconds. The survivors reached the first bunker and destroyed it with grenades and demolition charges. 3 more men fell assaulting the second bunker. The remaining Marines took it. The third bunker fell to the last 5 men standing. The platoon suffered 12 casualties from 37 men to take a position we considered impregnable. The entire action took 4 minutes from order to completion. This was not courage. This was systematic application of acceptable casualties to achieve objectives faster than we could respond. The concept of acceptable casualties horrified Japanese officers, trained to value their soldiers' lives within the context of achieving objectives. Marines calculated casualties as the cost of victory and paid that cost without hesitation when the objective warranted it. This created a psychological advantage beyond material superiority. Japanese commanders, knowing Marines would accept 50% casualties to take a position, faced impossible decisions: defend with insufficient force and lose the position. Defend with adequate force, but weaken other positions. Abandon the position and cede terrain. Every option led to defeat. The only variable was timing. Major Yoshi Takahori, senior staff officer on Iwo, who survived the battle, analyzed this dilemma in post-war interrogations. General Kuribayashi understood that we could not stop the Marines. Our defenses were designed to delay them and inflict maximum casualties. We succeeded brilliantly at inflicting casualties. Over 20,000 Marines were killed or wounded in 36 days. This would have destroyed any other military force's ability to continue offensive operations. The Marines reinforced and continued attacking without any reduction in intensity. We calculated that inflicting 10,000 casualties would halt their advance for at least a week. They suffered 10,000 casualties in the first week, and their advance never slowed. This revealed the fundamental imbalance. They could replace casualties faster than we could. They had 50 Marine divisions in the Pacific Theater or training in the United States. We had finite defenders on each island. Mathematics dictated our defeat. The mathematics extended beyond simple manpower. Marines landed with logistical support that enabled sustained operations at intensities Japanese forces could not match. Second Lieutenant Toshio Yamamoto, captured on Saipan, witnessed the contrast firsthand during a nighttime infiltration. I led a patrol to observe American positions 3 days after their landing. We expected to find exhausted troops with limited supplies, as Japanese forces would have been after 3 days of intense combat on a contested beachhead. Instead, we found Marines eating hot food, receiving ammunition resupply by truck with medical tents, treating tomatum wounded, and rest areas where units rotated off the line. Their supply dumps contained more ammunition than my entire regiment possessed. They had mobile kitchens preparing fresh meals. They had portable showers and laundry facilities. They were fighting the most intense battle of the Pacific War and living better than we did in garrison. This demonstrated that defeating them was impossible. They would never run out of food, ammunition, medicine, or replacements. We would. The relentless American logistics created a form of attrition warfare that favored Marines. Despite higher initial casualties, Japanese defenders fought from fixed positions with limited supplies and no reinforcement. Every casualty was permanent. Every round of ammunition expended could not be replaced. Marines fought from an expanding beachhead with supplies arriving daily by ship and air. Casualties were evacuated and replaced. Ammunition was unlimited. The longer a battle lasted, the weaker Japanese defenders became while Marines grew stronger. This dynamic proved decisive on Palileo, where Colonel Nakagawa's defense lasted from September 15th to November 27th. The 1st Marine Division suffered such heavy casualties that it was withdrawn and replaced by elements of 81st Infantry Division in October. A 2nd Marine Division continued operations until Army units relieved them. The battle that Japanese planners expected to last 1 week lasted 11 weeks. Japanese defenders inflicted over 10,000 American casualties, but the Americans could afford those losses and continue attacking. Japan could not afford to defend every island at such cost. The arithmetic was unsustainable. The unsustainability became clear to Japanese military leadership by mid-1944. Intelligence summaries distributed to garrison commanders acknowledged that Marines could not be stopped, only delayed. One document captured on Tinian provided guidance that revealed complete abandonment of any hope for victory. When defending against Marine assault, do not expect to hold positions indefinitely. The objective is to delay the American advance sufficiently to enable other strategic objectives. Each day of resistance is valuable. Each Marine killed or wounded is valuable. But understand that the position will fall. Prepare accordingly. Stock positions with maximum ammunition. Create redundant defensive positions. Plan to fall back in stages. Accept that you will likely die in the defense. Your sacrifice buys time for the Empire. There is honor in this sacrifice, even without victory. This grim calculus defined Japanese defensive strategy for the final year of the Pacific War. Defenders no longer fought to win battles. They fought to make those battles so costly that Americans might negotiate rather than invade Japan itself. Marines, by accepting casualties that would have forced other armies to halt, negated this strategy. They paid the price demanded and continued advancing. No cost was too high. No position was too strong. The offensive never stopped. Private Tadashi Gawa, one of the few survivors from Tarawa, later described the psychological impact of facing such an enemy. After the first day of battle, we knew we would lose. The Marines had landed in overwhelming force. They had naval gunfire that destroyed our positions. They had air support that bombed us continuously. But we still believed we could make them pay such a terrible price they would reconsider future invasions. Then we watched them continue attacking despite horrific casualties. They walked through machine gun fire that killed dozens. More Marines came behind them. We killed them too. More came. We fought for 3 days with absolute commitment. We inflicted thousands of casualties. Wedded almost to the last man, and the Marines took Tarawa on schedule. They paid the price we demanded and continued their advance across the Pacific. That was when we understood the war was lost, an enemy who will pay any price to win. Cannot be defeated by making victory expensive. This realization spread through the Japanese military as survivors from each battle carried their experiences to the next. By the time Marines landed on Iwo Jima in February 1945, every Japanese defender knew they faced the most implacable enemy in the Pacific. They knew they would die. They knew the Marines would take the island. The only question was how many Marines would die with them. General Kuribayashi's defensive plan accepted these realities and built strategy around them. His orders to troops acknowledged what official propaganda denied. We cannot win this battle. We can only make the Americans bleed for every meter of ground. That is our mission. Accept death, inflict casualties, delay their advance. This is how we serve the Empire in its darkest hour. This evaluation proved correct across numerous engagements. On February 19, 1945, the D-Day landing on Iwo Jima offered the most detailed Japanese military study of Marine capabilities. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, arguably Japan's most skilled defensive commander in the Pacific, spent months analyzing Marine strategies and devising fortifications specifically to counter them. His preparations were exceptional. Yet before Kuribayashi's plans were tested, Marine raiders had already displayed abilities beyond ordinary excellence. These elite units conducted deep infiltration operations, instilling fear far greater than their numbers might suggest. Japanese troops realized raiders operated with devastating efficiency at night. Colonel Kono Ichiki learned this painfully on Guadalcanal in August 1942. His 900 men had previously defeated Chinese forces with aggressive nocturnal attacks. Japanese doctrine assumed Americans feared darkness. Ichiki attempted a textbook night offensive against Marine positions along the Tanaru River. Raiders from the 1st Marine Raider Battalion lay in prepared positions. At 1:30 a.m. on August 21st, Ichiki's troops waded into the river. Raiders opened fire at point-blank range with automatic weapons, supported by pre-registered artillery. Within 20 minutes, Japanese losses exceeded 700 killed, while Marines suffered only 35 casualties. Though the Raider units were eventually merged into regular Marine divisions in 1944, their tactics spread widely. Standard Marine infantry adopted techniques pioneered by the Raiders: persistent night patrols, independent decision-making by small units, and highly coordinated communications. The result was a force that fought relentlessly around the clock, an intensity Japanese soldiers could not match. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who engaged Marines on 3 islands before his capture at Okinawa, summarized the experience. The Marines never stopped. Day assaults with overwhelming firepower, night raids by small units infiltrating our lines, constant artillery harassment denying rest, continuous air attacks during the day. From landing to defeat, we were under unrelenting pressure. Traditionally, Japanese troops controlled the night and rested after daylight battles. Against Marines, there was no reprieve, only continuous combat until death or capture. This was industrial-scale warfare applied without mercy. The industrial aspect of Marine operations both fascinated and terrified Japanese analysts. Unlike Japanese forces, which relied on morale and individual valor to compensate for limited resources, Marines applied maximum force systematically to every challenge. Against fortified positions, they did not depend on courage or cunning tactics. They identified the targets, called in artillery barrages that fired hundreds of shells, deployed tanks with flamethrowers to flush out survivors, and sent infantry to secure the area. If resistance persisted, naval bombardments from destroyers or battleships obliterated the site. The efficiency of this methodical destruction was terrifying. Second Lieutenant Saburo Endo, an artillery forward observer on Saipan, chronicled Marine combined arms tactics during the June 1944 invasion. His diary described, "Marines landed under 3 hours of continuous naval bombardment and 2 hours of airstrikes before the first craft touched the beach. Every movement was supported by tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and air support. They advanced deliberately, destroying everything in their path. When we held defensive positions, they summoned battleship fire that literally erased hills. They never relied on courage or trickery. They used overwhelming force to eliminate resistance, then moved forward. This was not conventional warfare, but industrial-scale destruction applied systematically until opposition became impossible. We fought with rifles and light machine guns. They wielded the resources of an entire industrial nation." Endo's observations echoed what many Japanese soldiers realized too late. The Pacific War was not a contest of bravery or tactics, but a struggle between Japan's limited industrial capacity and America's overwhelming production power. Marines were the spearhead of that capability, trained to exploit American advantages ruthlessly while accepting casualties, leveraging superior numbers and replacements. Against such an enemy, Japanese skill and valor counted for nothing. The outcome was determined mathematically, with only duration and cost left uncertain. Kuribayashi prohibited banzai charges that had wasted Japanese lives in previous conflicts. He built a defense-in-depth system, funneling Marines into killing zones covered by multiple bunkers, positioning artillery for maximum impact on landing beaches, and constructing 11 miles of tunnels linking 1,500 caves. Every approach was pre-registered for mortar and artillery fire, turning the beaches into death traps. On February 19th, 3 Marine divisions, 70,000 men, landed on Iwo Jima. Kuribayashi's defenses initially functioned as designed. Naval bombardments barely dented fortifications. Marines landed in organized waves and suffered catastrophic casualties. Within minutes, the black volcanic sands were littered with dead and wounded. Japanese artillery observers delivered precisely coordinated fire. The attack appeared to fail, but the Marines did not retreat. They pushed forward under artillery fire, exploiting gaps between Japanese positions. When bunkers halted them, demolition teams crawled forward under fire to destroy them. When those fell, other Marines replaced them. The assault never paused. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto observed Marines assaulting the bunker beside his own. His diary reflects the shock Japanese defenders felt. A flamethrower team approached. "We killed the operator." His assistant took the weapon and continued. "We killed him." A third Marine grabbed it, was wounded, yet kept firing until the fuel emptied, then hurled grenades into firing ports. By then, demolition engineers reached the entrance. The position was lost. This scenario repeated 30 times in the first hour. How do you stop men who will not quit? The Japanese learned the brutal truth. You cannot. The arithmetic of Iwo Jima demonstrated Marine doctrine in full force. 70,000 Marines landed. 26,000 became casualties, including nearly 7,000 killed. All but 1,600 of 21,000 Japanese defenders perished, most captured due to unconsciousness or severe wounds. Marines paid an immense price, yet seized every objective. Kuribayashi, surviving until late March 1945, transmitted his final assessment to Tokyo before the fortress fell. Marines are the most effective combat force I have encountered. They have unique attributes. Training that produces units willing to accept casualties that would break others. Firepower far exceeding ours. 5-to-1 in artillery, 10-to-1 in air support. Junior leaders empowered to make squad-level decisions far faster than our company-level officers. And most importantly, they never stop attacking. No defense can withstand this combination indefinitely. This relentless assault unnerved Japanese defenders across the Pacific. Soldiers could accept defeat, understand being outgunned or outmaneuvered, but could not grasp an enemy that advanced without pause despite heavy losses. Corporal Hideo Takahashi explained post-war, "Unlike Army units that pause after casualties, Marines continue attacking over their own dead. This is not standard military doctrine. It is something entirely different." Their feared combat prowess was intentionally cultivated through training that destroyed recruits' civilian identity, then rebuilt them into warriors inseparable from the unit. Captured documents from Saipan describe the transformation. Boot camp lasted 8 weeks. In the first 4, instructors obliterated all civilian traits. Recruits were told they were worthless, that they would never become Marines, and pressured to quit. The physical and psychological abuse was extreme. Those who quit were publicly shamed. Those who stayed learned surrender was unacceptable. In the second 4 weeks, instructors reconstructed recruits into Marines, teaching them that every Marine who had ever lived was their brother. This created a unique bond. Marines fought because failure would betray every Marine before them, instilling the resolve to advance even when rational judgment suggested otherwise. Japanese forces encountered this mentality most starkly during catastrophic Banzai charges. On October 24-25, 1944, at Saipan, Colonel Takuya Takasha led roughly 3,000 soldiers in a final Banzai assault against Marine positions. Japanese doctrine predicted that absolute commitment would overwhelm defenders. The 27th Marine Division, mostly asleep at 3:30 a.m., was attacked. Soldiers screamed, "Bayonets fixed!" charging in overwhelming numbers. Standard doctrine called for retreat to regroup. Instead, Marines counterattacked instantly, using all available weapons, from point-blank artillery to trench knives. After 4 hours, Japanese bodies stretched 500 meters deep. American casualties were 90 killed and 230, 47 wounded. 3,000 Japanese soldiers died. Private First Class Tishi Yoshida, surviving with severe wounds, reported, "We were told Americans feared close combat and relied on firepower out of cowardice. We charged expecting them to break, yet they fought hand-to-hand and defeated us. I saw a Marine sergeant kill 7 men with bayonet and pistol before falling. This is not cowardice. We were lied to." Years of Japanese propaganda portrayed Americans as soft, individualistic, unable to endure hardship. Yet Marines endured foxholes filled with water, ate cold rations for weeks, and fought in extreme heat and humidity, thriving where Japanese endurance faltered. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, who survived Guadalcanal before capture at Bougainville in February 1944, described the contrast. "We subsisted on minimal rations, sometimes just rice twice daily, scavenging from the jungle. Marines ate 3 full meals daily, resupplied by air and sea, with fresh water, medical supplies, and endless ammunition. We realized we fought an enemy who would never run out of resources, a revelation that broke our resolve." Marine material superiority was decisive. Against bunkers, they called in artillery delivering hundreds of shells, brought forward flamethrower-equipped Sherman tanks, and used naval gunfire capable of leveling hills. If that failed, demolition teams applied hundreds of pounds of explosives. Lieutenant Shigeru Fuku, before his death on Guadalcanal, wrote the most comprehensive analysis of captured Marine combined arms tactics. Marines do not fight as isolated soldiers. They operate as a coordinated machine. Riflemen pin the enemy, machine gunners suppress fire, mortars create smoke screens, and artillery destroys defenses. Tanks advance with infantry following. Aircraft bomb any position artillery cannot reach. This happens within minutes of contact, coordinated by junior officers using radios. We do not possess. We cannot counter this because we cannot coordinate at the same speed. By the time our commander understands the situation and issues orders, the Marines have already moved to exploitor weakness. This speed of execution was possible because Marines delegated authority to the lowest possible level. Sergeants made decisions that Japanese doctrine reserved for captains. Corporals led assaults that required a lieutenant's authority in the Imperial Japanese Army. The result was an enemy that adapted faster than Japanese forces could react. When a bunker stopped a Marine advance, a sergeant would immediately redirect the attack through a different approach while calling in, supporting fire, all without waiting for orders from above. Japanese defenders often found themselves fighting enemies who appeared in unexpected directions because Marines had identified and exploited weaknesses before Japanese commanders recognized they existed. The most feared Marine weapon was not rifles or artillery. It was the flamethrower. Japanese soldiers trained to die honorably in combat discovered that flamethrowers offered no honorable death. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, captured on Okinawa with burns covering 40% of his body, described the psychological impact. We were taught to accept death in battle as glorious. Death by bullets, bayonets, artillery. These are warriors' deaths. Fire is something different. You watch flames approach your position. You smell comrades burning alive. You hear the screaming. There is no glory in this death. It is industrial slaughter. This is what the Marines understood that we did not. Modern war has no place for glory. It is about killing the enemy as efficiently as possible using the best tools available. This realization came too late for most Japanese defenders. By 1944, every Japanese soldier in the Pacific knew that facing Marines meant facing the most lethal combination of training, equipment, and doctrine the Americans possessed. Intelligence reports distributed to garrison forces described Marines with a mixture of respect and dread that bordered on superstition. One document captured on Tinian in July 1944 provided detailed guidance on defending against Marine assaults. The report acknowledged several facts that contradicted years of Japanese propaganda. First, Marines are physically larger and stronger than Japanese soldiers on average due to superior nutrition since childhood. Second, Marines receive more ammunition, better weapons, and more reliable equipment than Imperial Japanese Army troops. Third, Marine training emphasizes marksmanship to a degree unmatched by Japanese forces. The average Marine rifleman can hit targets at ranges where our soldiers cannot. Fourth, Marines operate with air and naval support that we cannot match or counter. Fifth, and most critically, Marines are trained to believe surrender is unacceptable. They will fight to death or victory. There is no third option. The report then provided tactical guidance that revealed how thoroughly Japanese confidence had collapsed. When facing Marines, do not expect them to retreat. Do not assume casualties will degrade their morale. Do not believe superiority in numbers provides an advantage as their firepower negates numerical superiority. Tan-Tudun-2. Not attempt banzai charges unless no other option exists, as Marines will slaughter charging. Troops with automatic weapons and artillery. Do not expect them to fear nighttime attacks as they fight effectively in darkness. The only effective defense is prepared positions protected by interlocking fields of fire with multiple fallback positions prepared in advance and with the understanding that the position will eventually fall. The goal is not to stop the Marines but to exact maximum casualties before the position is overrun. This defensive doctrine acknowledged reality but offered no path to victory. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, preparing Iwo Jima's defenses in early 1945, understood this perfectly. He wrote to his wife in January, 1 month before the invasion. "I am asked to defend Iwo Jima against American Marines. This is a mathematical problem with only one solution. The Marines will land with 70,000 men. They will have complete control of sea and air. They will bring unlimited ammunition and supplies. They will attack until Iwo Jima falls. My mission is not to defeat them. That is impossible. My mission is to make them pay such a terrible price that the Americans will reconsider invading the home islands. Every day I keep them fighting is a day the Empire has to and prepare. Every Marine killed is one less enemy in the final battle." Kuribayashi's strategy reflected the evolution of Japanese defensive doctrine from confident aggression to desperate attrition. The Marines who landed on Iwo Jima on February 19th faced defenses designed not to repel them, but to bleed them in ways that would destroy American resolve. Every bunker was positioned to require direct assault. Every cave entrance was covered by multiple firing positions. Every meter of ground cost lives to take. The strategy failed because it misunderstood Marine culture. High casualties did not break Marine morale. They reinforced it. Every fallen Marine demanded vengeance. Every day of brutal combat strengthened survivors' determination to win. The worse the fighting became, the harder Marines fought. This was incomprehensible to Japanese military thinking, which assumed that even fanatical troops had a breaking point. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto, who survived until March 10th before dying in his bunker, wrote his final diary entry the night before. "Tomorrow, the Marines will reach this position. We have killed hundreds of them in the past 3 weeks. More arrive every day. They do not weaken. They do not slow down. They do not stop. I thought our spirit was stronger than American materialism. I was wrong. The Marines have both spirit and material. They have courage equal to ours, combined with weapons and supplies we cannot match. They are what we claim to be. We are what we claim they were. This is the truth we die knowing." His bunker was destroyed the next morning by a Marine demolition team after a 6-hour battle that killed all 11 defenders and wounded 3 Marines. The position delayed the Marine advance by exactly 40 minutes before being bypassed by other units that continued advancing while combat engineers reduced the bunker. This pattern repeated across Iwo Jima thousands of times. Japanese defenders fought with desperate courage, inflicting terrible casualties, achieving nothing except their own deaths. The campaign ended on March 26th. The final statistics told the story of what happened when Marines fought the best defenses Japan could create. 21,000 Japanese defenders died. 1,6 surrendered, most because they were unconscious or physically incapable of resistance. The Marines suffered 26,000 casualties from 70,000 men committed, nearly 40% casualties. Any other military force would have required months to recover. 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions were back in action within 6 weeks. This ability to absorb casualties and continue fighting became the defining characteristic that most terrified Japanese defenders. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, imprisoned in Hawaii after his capture, explained in a 1946 interview what Japanese soldiers felt facing Marines. The worst part was knowing they would never stop. You could kill half a Marine unit, and the survivors would continue attacking. You could wound their leaders, and sergeants would take command. You could fight them to exhaustion, and they would attack again the next day. There was no way towing. You could only kill them until they killed you. That is not war. That is mutual annihilation. And the Marines had more men than we did. The American industrial capacity that produced waves of replacement Marines astonished Japanese military planners. Intelligence reports from late 1944 noted that Marine divisions suffered 75% casualties on PLO in September 1944, then returned to full strength within 3 months. Those replacements landed on Iwo Jima in February and fought with the same effectiveness as veterans. This ability to regenerate defeated units was beyond Japanese capability. The Imperial Japanese Army had no comparable training system, no replacement pipeline that could maintain unit quality while absorbing catastrophic losses. American efficiency extended to every aspect of Marine operations. Wounded Marines received medical treatment within minutes of being hit. Casualty evacuation by air and sea moved wounded men from battlefield to hospital ship in hours. Blood plasma, antibiotics, surgical care that saved lives at rates unprecedented in military history. Japanese wounded often died from lack of medical supplies, from infected wounds, from injuries that American medicine routinely treated. Captured Japanese soldiers watched Marines who should have died from wounds that would have killed Japanese soldiers instead survive to fight again. The final humiliation came after Japanese surrender in August 1945. Marines occupied Japanese home islands expecting resistance from a population indoctrinated to die rather than submit. Instead, they found exhausted people, grateful the war had ended. Private First Class Teishi Yoshida repatriated in 19/46, after recovering from wounds received on Saipan, described his return home. Everything we were told was lies. The Marines did not torture prisoners. They provided food, medical care, shelter. They treated us better than our own officers had. The Americans were not barbarians. We were the barbarians. This knowledge destroyed what remained of our faith in the empire. Thousands of former Japanese soldiers reached similar conclusions. The post-war interrogation reports revealed common themes: respect for Marine fighting qualities, bitterness toward Japanese leadership that had lied about American capabilities, recognition that the war had been hopeless from the start because Japan could not match American industrial capacity or the fighting quality of troops like the Marines. The most comprehensive assessment came from General Tadamichi Kuribayashi's final message from Iwo Jima, delivered through desperate radio transmission on March 21st, 5 days before the island fell. Hugh wrote, "I have fought the Marines for 31 days. They are the finest soldiers I have encountered. Their training is superior. Their equipment is overwhelming. Their courage equals ours, and their numbers are endless. Japan cannot defeat such an enemy. We can only die fighting them and hope that our sacrifice buys time for peace negotiations that preserve something of our nation. To my fellow officers preparing to defend the home islands, know this: the Marines will come. You cannot stop them. You can only make them pay in blood for every meter of ground. Perhaps if the price is high enough, they will negotiate rather than destroy everything. That is our only hope." That hope died with the atomic bombs in August. But Kuribayashi's assessment of Marines proved accurate. They were the tip of the spear that broke Japanese defensive lines across the Pacific. They paid a terrible price with casualty rates that would have destroyed lesser organizations. But they never broke, never retreated, never surrendered an objective. They were exactly what Japanese propaganda had claimed the Imperial Japanese Army was: invincible warriors who would fight to death before accepting defeat. The final irony was that Marines achieved this through systematic training and overwhelming material support, not through mystical warrior spirit or racial superiority. They proved that modern warfare required both courage and industrial capacity, both training and technology, both individual sacrifice and national resources. Japan had courage and training. America had everything. The Marines exemplified this completeness in a manner unmatched by any other American formation. Japanese veterans recognized this distinction. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, interviewed in 1975 as an elderly man, summarized what his generation learned while fighting Marines. "We were taught that spirit could overcome material, that our willingness to die made us invincible. The Marines demonstrated that spirit combined with material achieves victory, whereas spirit alone does not. They were as ready to die as we were, but they had Sherman tanks, naval artillery, unlimited ammunition, air supremacy, medical care, food, and the full resources of America behind them. We had only our rifles, courage, and promises of triumph. That was insufficient. It could never have been enough. That was insufficient. It could never have been enough. The Marines confirmed this on every island they captured. The data supports this conclusion. Marines engaged in every major Pacific campaign from Guadalcanal in August 1942 to Okinawa in June 1945. They suffered 86,000 casualties, including 9,500 killed. Yet they never failed to secure an objective, never abandoned a captured position, and never gave Japanese forces reason to believe they could be defeated through superior tactics or fighting spirit. The cost was immense. The results were decisive. Japanese military analysts who studied Marine operations post-war reached a unanimous conclusion. The Marines represented the ultimate manifestation of American military power. They fused a warrior ethos akin to Japanese Bushido with industrial capabilities reflecting America's production capacity. They trained soldiers willing to die for victory while supplying those soldiers with weapons and support that ensured success. This combination was unbeatable. The lessons came too late for the 21,000 Japanese troops who faced Marines on Iwo Jima, the 30,000 who confronted them on Okinawa, and the hundreds of thousands preparing to resist them on the home islands before surrender ended the war. Those soldiers knew only that Marines were the enemy they feared most, the enemy their leaders could not halt, the enemy who would keep advancing regardless of casualties until every Japanese defender was eliminated. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto's final diary entry, written hours before his death in a bunker on Iwo Jima, captured this understanding. He wrote, "The Marines will prevail, not because they are braver than we are, nor because they desire victory more than we do. They will win because their nation provides them with everything necessary to triumph, and they will wield those resources mercilessly until we are all dead." This was the truth our leaders should have revealed. We were samurai armed with swords against men wielding machine guns who also possessed the spirit of samurai. Hope never existed. There was only death. Yamamoto's bunker fell the next day. The Marines who cleared it discovered his diary, which was forwarded to intelligence officers, translated, and archived among thousands of similar documents. His words reflected the brutal reality Japanese soldiers across the Pacific had learned firsthand. Fighting the Marines was not like facing other American forces, or British, Chinese, or any other opponent. It was confronting an enemy who combined every quality Japan claimed with every advantage Japan lacked. That fusion made the Marines the most feared adversary Japanese soldiers encountered. Statistics tell part of the story. Battles tell more. But the testimonies of surviving Japanese soldiers provide the full picture. They faced men who would not stop, who would not surrender, who would die before accepting defeat, and who had the resources to make their determination lethal. Against such an enemy, courage alone was insufficient. Training was insufficient. Determination was insufficient. Only surrender or death remained options. The Japanese military chose death. The Marines delivered it with ruthless efficiency. That was why Japanese soldiers feared the Marines above all other units. The Marines pledged to seize their objectives. And they did. They promised to endure any cost. And they did. They never stopped. Japanese defenders realized that courage meant nothing when confronting an enemy who matched their resolve and exceeded their firepower by overwhelming margins. That was the lesson learned in blood from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. After the war, as propaganda faded, Japanese veterans acknowledged the truth their leaders had concealed. The Marines embodied everything Japan claimed its soldiers were, supported by everything Japan could never provide. Against such an opponent, the war was lost before it began. The Marines demonstrated this conclusively, island by island, at a cost measured in thousands of lives on both sides.